The empire, long divided, must unite. A great dynasty burns and tyrants rule over the ashes. When discussing the three kingdoms, we can't avoid mentioning Dong Zhuo. He was notorious for his brutality and directly caused the collapse of the once powerful Han Dynasty. But who was the real Dong Zhuo? Today, we will dive deeper into the true history of his life and uncover the man behind the legend. Dong Zhuo was born in Liangzhou, a western province of the empire, in the first half of the 2nd century AD. Even today, this area is known for its poor soil, harsh environment, and underdeveloped economy. Almost 2,000 years ago, it was akin to the Wild West, plagued by sandstorms and lawlessness. Ethnic minorities frequently rebelled, only to be brutally suppressed by the empire. In this tough land, young men, including Dong Zhuo, learned horseback riding and archery from an early age. Dong Zhuo's father was a paramilitary officer who interacted with all kinds of people, imperial officials, thugs, and ethnic rebels. Given these factors, you can already guess Dong Zhuo's character. He was tall, strong, and bold. He developed a wild, ruthless, and daring nature from a young age. But he was also loyal to his friends and always ready to help them. In his early years, Dong was the kind of person you would definitely want as a friend. Around the 160s AD, after Dong Zhuo joined the imperial army, he quickly scaled the ranks due to his bravery and skills. Whenever he received rewards or spoils of war, he would distribute them to his soldiers, earning their deep respect and loyalty. He was the kind of person who ignored all rules and regulations, but he was undeniably a charismatic leader. He gradually gained the full support of his troops, and even the ethnic rebels who hated and feared him also admired him. As time passed, the army he commanded gradually became his private army. They were loyal to him, not the emperor 1,000 miles away. Seeing Dong Zhuo as a rising warlord made the central government wary. However, they had no choice but to accept his rule. After all, the empire still needed him to suppress the endless rebellions. Until this point, Dong Zhuo was just an ordinary warlord who might have continued living this way until his death. However, destiny had other plans for him. A palace coup in 189 AD would completely change his fate. Chaos is a ladder. In 189 AD, the 17-year-old emperor ascended the throne. By then, the empire was already on the brink of collapse. Although the Yellow Turban Rebellion had been suppressed, the central government had decentralized the power to local authorities during the suppression, resulting in warlords emerging throughout the empire. To make matters worse, a fierce political struggle was brewing within the court between the emperor's uncle He Jin and the eunuchs who controlled a private army. To eradicate the eunuchs and their power, Yuan Shao recommended that He Jin secretly contact Dong Zhuo, asking him to bring troops to the capital to eliminate them. Dong Zhuo saw this as a golden opportunity. Without hesitation, Dong Zhuo quickly led his 3,000 best soldiers toward the capital, Luoyang. While his army was on the way, a coup had already occurred. One night in September 189 AD, the eunuchs killed He Jin, and then Yuan Shao led his soldiers to storm the palace, killing anyone who looked like a eunuch. It was utter chaos. Screams and the clash of swords were everywhere, and every faction was looking for the young emperor. So several ministers quickly escorted him out of the palace. After walking for a long time, they finally found a wooden cart. The emperor and his 8-year-old brother, Prince Liu Xie, got into the cart, and the ministers pushed it slowly until dawn. They had never experienced such misery in their entire lives. Upon hearing about the coup, Dong Zhuo rushed to the capital. The young emperor, terrified and exhausted from the night's ordeal, saw a dust cloud on the horizon and the approaching army. Fearing being taken, he burst into tears. The ministers were also pale with fear. At this point, Dong Zhuo was not yet as arrogant as he would later become. He dismounted his horse and kneeled before the emperor. The 17-year-old emperor appeared nervous and rambled, while his little brother, Liu Xie, spoke clearly and fluently. Suddenly, Dong Zhuo had a thought. He liked this little boy. More importantly, Liu Xie was only 8 years old and would be much easier to control. Making Liu Xie the emperor would give Dong Zhuo immense power. At this time, many officials still thought Dong Zhuo was just a country bumpkin with a small band of barbarian soldiers and believed they could use him as a pawn. They were wrong. Once Dong and his men entered Luoyang, they had no intention of leaving. Finding nowhere better than this prosperous city, they indulged in the new luxurious lifestyle. Wasting no time, Dong Zhuo quickly appointed himself as the chancellor of the empire, effectively making him the regent. The new power made Dong Zhuo laugh even in his dreams. However, he knew his position was not secure. Yuan Shao still commanded several thousand imperial guards and over 10,000 troops under Ding Yuan, the capital's defense commander. So he implemented some brilliant strategies. First, to create the illusion of a large army and intimidate Yuan and others, Dong ordered his troops to leave the city every night and re-enter with great fanfare the next day, giving the impression of endless reinforcements. Second, he bribed Lu Bu to kill Ding Yuan, whose troops were then absorbed into Dong Zhuo's forces. To further consolidate his power, Dong Zhuo pardoned and promoted officials previously persecuted by the eunuchs, hoping to gain their support. Those who couldn't be swayed were intimidated into submission. Basically, he just made an offer that they couldn't refuse. As he told one official, "I know you are a smart man. You definitely know it's better to accept this offer than to have your whole family killed, right?" Of course, no one dared to say no under such a threat. Now his only opponent in the court was Yuan Shao, a formidable force with family influence throughout the empire. However, for the moment, Yuan had not yet challenged him. So in October 189 AD, Dong Zhuo decided it was time to change the emperor. According to one source, Dong Zhuo expressed his plans in a high-level meeting. While others were too afraid to speak, Yuan Shao disagreed. Dong Zhuo was furious and drew his sword, shouting, "The empire is in my hands. Who dares defy me? Do you want to test my blade?" Without fear, the angry Yuan Shao also drew his sword and retorted, "Do you really think you are the only one with strength in the realm?" The two stood face to face in a tense standoff. Time stopped for everyone. After a few seconds, understanding how serious the situation was, Yuan Shao quickly left the meeting. He soon fled the city and went north. Concerned that Yuan Shao might raise an army against him, Dong Zhuo pardoned him and even appointed him a local governor. But Yuan Shao wasn't a person who could easily swallow humiliation. Now, with the capital entirely under his control, Dong Zhuo could do whatever he wanted. He replaced the emperor immediately. When the deposed emperor's mother protested, Dong forced her to drink poison a few days later. The nation was shocked when the news spread across the empire. How could a low-life barbarian from the frontier to do such things? Within just 6 months, certain warlords gathered under Yuan Shao's banner, forming a coalition of over 200,000 troops. Their common goal was to eliminate the evil Dong Zhuo. But Dong Zhuo was not easily scared. When he heard the news, he just laughed and said to his generals, "Do they really think a coalition can save them? They are just like a bunch of dogs barking at a tiger." Until that moment, Dong Zhuo's reign of terror hadn't even begun. What he did next would make the empire tremble. Stay tuned for my next video.